I could feel my heart pounding in my chest the second I saw the caretaker's shed door locked from the outside. I could hear my son's muffled cries through the thin wooden walls. My wife, standing next to me, looked pale as she called out to him, but there was no response. And in that moment, I knew something was terribly wrong. Our son, Dylan, is 8 years old, autistic. Changes, noise, and being left alone can overwhelm him. The sight of that shed, locked up tight, made every nerve in my body stand on edge. A small crowd had begun to gather, drawn by the sound of Dylan's cries. But no one seemed to know how to help. We were all just standing there, helpless. And then, of course, there was Karen, the new HOA president. She appeared out of nowhere, striding confidently toward us, her arms crossed over her chest like she was walking into a business meeting, not a crisis. I'd never been fond of Karen. She had that air about her, the kind of person who felt entitled to enforce every ridiculous rule in the book, no exceptions, no understanding. You've probably seen her around, right? The person who's always telling kids to stay off the grass, who calls out dog owners for letting their pets sniff the community rose bushes, who issues fines for trash cans that are left out a minute too long. That was Karen, distrustful, controlling, and completely without compassion. As soon as I saw her, I marched up to her, jaw clenched, my only thought being to get Dylan out of that shed. Karen looked me up and down with this smirk that just made my blood boil. "Don't look at me like that," she said, her voice cold and dismissive. "Your son was running around the gardens, disturbing the peace." What? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to scream, to ask her how she could possibly justify what she'd done. But no, I held my ground. "So, I locked him in there to calm him down," Karen added, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. The audacity of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. My wife's hands started shaking, her face pale, and I could see the tears in her eyes as she gripped my arm for support. I tried the shed handle, yanking on it desperately, but it wouldn't budge. Inside, Dylan's voice was growing higher, more frantic. He was terrified, and I knew that if he felt cornered, his fear would only get worse. "Open it right now," I demanded, fury pumping through my veins. But Karen just shrugged. "When he learns to behave, then maybe I'll let him out. We have rules around here," she said. "I'm tired of him rummaging around our property." My heart broke hearing Dylan's sobs, those cries I knew so well, cries that told me he was trapped, scared, and overwhelmed. A woman named Beatrice, who usually kept to herself, tried to intervene. "Karen, you can't just lock a child away like that. He could suffocate in there." But Karen, being Karen, just scowled at her. "Mind your own business," she snapped, looking at Beatrice like she was the one causing trouble. "This is between me and these so-called parents who can't control their kid." The more she spoke, the angrier I got, but I knew I couldn't lose control. Not now. Dylan needed me to stay calm. So I took a breath, trying to stay level-headed. "My son is autistic," I said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. "He doesn't understand all your rules. He's not hurting anyone by exploring the gardens." Karen narrowed her eyes. "I'm tired of excuses. A child who can't follow instructions doesn't belong in a well-regulated community like ours. This place has standards." That hit me harder than anything else. My wife, her eyes filling with tears, held Dylan's name against the door, whispering through the wood, trying to comfort him. His sobs were like daggers to my heart, and I felt completely helpless. Tyler, one of our neighbors, had already dialed 911. I could hear him quietly explaining the situation to the operator, detailing how Dylan was locked in the shed, that he was in distress and possibly in danger. When Karen realized the police were on their way, she just shrugged and sneered. "Go ahead, call whoever you want. By the time they get here, your son will have learned his lesson." I couldn't believe her. Here she was, treating this like some petty rule of violation, and I had to stand there, powerless. It wasn't long before the sound of sirens pierced the air, and within moments, 2 officers arrived. They jumped out of the car, scanning the scene, clearly confused by what they were walking into a crowd of neighbors, a distraught mother, and Karen standing there with the key to the shed. Officer Ramos, a seasoned officer, approached first. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyeing the situation carefully. I didn't even have to think. "My son is locked inside," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's autistic and he's terrified." Karen, of course, didn't miss a beat. "Yes, it's an HOA matter," she said, tossing her hair as if she were the queen of the neighborhood. "He was trespassing, so I secured him for his own safety." The officers exchanged a quick look. That's not how these situations are handled, Officer Ramos said, his tone firm. You can't just lock a child in a shed. You have no right to do that. But Karen wasn't backing down. I'm the president of the HOA, she said, practically sneering at him. We're allowed to protect community assets. I felt my temper flare, but I kept my voice steady. You're refusing to let a child out of a shed. That's false imprisonment, Janice, the other officer, said sharply. Karen didn't budge. She held the key like it was a weapon, refusing to unlock the door. Just then, something unexpected happened. The officers received a frantic update on their radios. I couldn't make out all the words, but it was clear that the situation was escalating quickly. Ma'am, open it now, or we're forcing entry, Officer Ramos said, his voice growing louder. But Karen didn't move. Instead, she almost looked like she was about to throw the key away, and that's when everything exploded. I rushed forward to grab the key, but Ramos was right there, stopping me before things got too out of hand. In the chaos, the key fell from Karen's hand. I snatched it up and unlocked the shed. As the door creaked open, I saw Dylan curled up in the corner, his small body shaking. The darkness inside the shed had terrified him, and I rushed in, scooping him up into my arms. It's okay, buddy, I whispered, feeling him cling to me. Behind us, Karen was still ranting, demanding that she be released. She couldn't understand what she'd done wrong. You can't arrest me for protecting community property, she howled, but the officers had already taken control. Dylan was shaking violently in my arms, still overwhelmed by the experience, but at least he was free now. The police quickly detained Karen and, in the confusion, something even more absurd happened. Army tanks, yes, tanks came rumbling down the street. I couldn't make sense of it. The 911 call had gotten jumbled somehow, or maybe someone had reported a hostage situation by mistake. But just like that, we had military vehicles parked in front of our quiet neighborhood. The soldiers who jumped out looked just as confused as the rest of us. The situation was surreal. Military tanks in a suburban cul-de-sac? But as absurd as it was, it did highlight just how serious things had gotten. Karen's reckless actions had led to a full-scale response, one that none of us had expected. Thankfully, the military quickly realized there was no threat, but they did apologize for the confusion. Karen, still handcuffed and being led to a police car, was beyond stunned. It was like her entire world had just come crashing down. The neighbors who had been watching from a distance started murmuring, some of them relieved that justice was finally being done. But that was just the beginning. Karen had gone too far, and the community was waking up. It didn't take long for the HOA board to act. The meeting was scheduled, and I knew that Karen's reign was coming to an end. The board voted to remove her, and the apology from the community came just in time to give us some peace of mind. Dylan, though, was still struggling. His nightmares continued for weeks, and the trauma of what had happened wasn't something that could be erased overnight. But we worked together, slowly helping him reclaim the spaces he once loved. One of the most significant changes came when we worked with the community to create a sensory garden, a peaceful place where kids like Dylan could relax and feel safe. It was a small Tory, but it meant the world to us. Karen's departure from the neighborhood wasn't celebrated, but it was a relief. The entire ordeal had taught me something profound. When we stand together, we can overcome even the most oppressive forces. And if you're watching this now, I want you to know this doesn't let anyone, no matter their title, control you with fear. Speak up. Stand up. Because sometimes, the greatest change comes when decent people refuse to stay silent.